Vance Joseph is back in town, and the DNVR Broncos podcast is back to break this down, and I guarantee you, we are about to have the time of our life, Henry. And Vance is back in town, ready to have the time of his life. We are back on the podcast, ready to have the time of our life. And if you want to have the time of your life, go win some money over at our presenting sponsor, DraftKings Sportsbook. A big win is something to celebrate, and you can do that at DraftKings Sportsbook. Pick the right bet, and you will win. Use that code DNVR when you sign up to get all the best offers. Henry, how are you feeling with Vance Joseph in town?
I'm warming up to it. Warming
up to it? You've been all about it.
I have not been all about it. I just haven't been saying the world's going to end if they do it.
Well,
There's a difference.
I'm glad the world's not ending because the world would be over now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad that it's not. But yeah, no Broncos fan really wanted Vance Joseph back for very, very, very obvious reasons. I mean, the man was bad as a head coach, and it's simple as that. I mean, it was the first back-to-back losing seasons, his two only seasons here, first one since 1971, 1972. Like, he kind of did, you can't put the whole last 7 years on, but he did kind of bring in this era of losing in some ways.
He literally did. The year before, the Broncos were a winning team, and since his first year, they haven't had a winning team.
Yep, and maybe putting all 7 years of failure on him is unfair. It definitely is.
That's definitely unfair.
But, it was kind of the spark at the beginning, and because of that, I mean, when was the last unsuccessful head coach? I guess you have Josh McDaniels in there. Before that, it was Mike Shanahan, it was Reeves, it was whoever the hell was before that.
Maybe Wade Phillips?
Oh, Wade Phillips. I always forget that he had that. But he was unsuccessful.
And speaking of Wade Phillips, he was a head coach, failed head coach in Denver, that came back to be the Broncos defensive coordinator, just like Vance Joseph. Now, kind of a big, big difference there.
You think so? Experience-wise, yeah.
Well, experience-wise, but also 2 decades in between leaving as the head coach and coming back as a defensive coordinator. While there's not so many pieces that are similar, the fans still have that same taste in their mouth because they haven't won and done other things. Broncos won 2 Super Bowls in between Wade leaving and coming back. And Wade also went and showed that he could be a great defensive coordinator other places before they hired him in 2015. So it's just interesting that this has happened before in Broncos history, but very different circumstances. And Justin Simmons, there's a couple of guys, Brandon McManus, that were on this team when Vance Joseph was here the first time around.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I'm warming up to it. When I woke up...
But you've been warm to it.
I have not been warm. What are you talking about?
Last week, you were making the argument that Vance was, you said
average.
You said above average.
Average to above average.
Yeah. I would say that's warm. I'm not saying you're flaming hot for him.
I thought they were going to go get Vic Fangio, somebody really good. I wasn't excited about this. And then the caveat on top of that was I still wouldn't touch him because of the history with Denver. So that was the other piece. I was not... Check the tapes. I was as anti-Vance Joseph as anybody. But
saying he's an above average coordinator, I think is warm to a situation.
I feel like saying I would not touch him in any circumstance kind of overrules that though. So
why are you warming up to going from you wouldn't touch him in any circumstance to now you're warming up to him?
Well, mostly because I think we all have to warm up to him. And, there's I think everybody's going to go through this period where they think of Vance Joseph, the head coach, and it just brings back bad memories. And you wonder, there's other average coordinators out there. Like, why pick the one with baggage? And so, you work through some of those thoughts.
Not baggage?
Not baggage.
Wow.
I'm learning.
Impressive.
I'm learning. But I do think schematically, it does make a lot of sense. I think what he brings to the table is maybe not necessarily exactly what I wanted, but I think that there are factors that I like. So, for example, I wasn't a huge fan of the Fangio defense here. And I get that it's the hot defense, and schematically it is probably the top defense in the NFL. But you look at the players that the Broncos have and say, well, Justin Simmons, leave him high. Don't bring him down in the box half the time. I think that that's just kind of a waste of his talents. I think that Pat Surtain, you give him more responsibilities. You don't have him play some zone. You let him lock up good receivers. And I think that, we all know what this defense looks like. I mean, this is the Wade Phillips defense. This is what Vance Joseph runs. And so Vance Joseph is going to come in here. He's going to play press man coverage. He's going to ask Pat Surtain to follow around the best receivers. He's going to play a bunch of cover one. And when it's not cover one, there's going to be some cover three in there, maybe a little cover two, but mostly cover one. You're going to get Justin Simmons sitting back where he's at his very best. And I think that, the other piece, what do they love to do? I mean, we remember the NASCAR packages. Everybody loves that stuff, and we haven't seen so much of it recently. And that's something that Vance Joseph will bring here, is those exotic third down rushes. And for a team that's lacking a pass rush, I think that fits pretty well too.
Fair, and that's something that Vance is going to have to do, is be able to get pressure, especially with, you don't know if you're going to have Randy Gregory, you don't know exactly the pass rusher that Baron Browning is going to be. We've certainly seen flashes from him, but what are the Broncos getting in Vance Joseph? He became a defensive coordinator in 2016 when he took over the Miami Dolphins for the first time. Of course, the Broncos wanted to hire him that season, but the Bengals didn't allow it, so he goes to Miami for a season. And in his 7 years of either being a head coach or a defensive coordinator leading the defense, what the Dolphins have done, or what Vance Joseph has done, they were 18th in points per game in Miami, 22nd in points per game in Denver, 13th in points per game in Denver, back-to-back years. Then in Arizona, 28th, 12th, 11th, and 31st. Now, we do have some offensive news coming down, but let's just focus on Vance Joseph right now. So what you're getting is you're getting a guy who's never led a top 10 defense. You're getting a guy who's been a top half defensive coordinator 3 of his 7 years. That means he's been a bottom half of the league coordinator 4 of his 7 years. And every stop but one, when he's gone to that team, they've regressed in defense that first year. When he joined Miami, they went from the 19th best defense in the NFL to the 18th best defense in the NFL. So the 1 year they actually took a step forward, it was only one spot. It was just slightly different. And then when he joined Denver, the Broncos went from the 4th best defense in the NFL to the 22nd best defense in the NFL. By scoring. That's what matters in this game is scoring. I don't care about yards. I mean, that's certainly not as important to me. When he joined Arizona's defense, they went from the 26th best defense in the NFL, so certainly not good, to the 28th best defense in the NFL. They regressed. So this is why a lot of people are not that happy with that hire, is he hasn't had high-end success anywhere he's been a defensive coordinator, and he's only had 2 years of borderline top 10 defense, and then he just hasn't really come in and really raised the ship of any defense that much.
But again, though, that's all the past. That's all the past. And sure,
well, how do you judge people if it's not
based on
what
the scheme is going to be? And I think that I look around and see the players that he has, and this fits so much better than what he had in Arizona. I honestly think you can throw some of that out just because, I mean, who do they even have out there? Like Jalen Thompson's on the field a whole bunch. And you look through passer rating allowed. You just look at the passer rating that his cornerbacks allowed. Marco Wilson was the only one who gave up a better passer rating than Damari Mathis last year. It was a pretty wide margin between him and even Byron Murphy. They just don't have the players for that. Isaiah Simmons, not a fit for that scheme. He's not somebody. What you want from that position is somebody who can just either go and play the run or somebody who can put in and just cover tight ends. He's a good player. He was fine, but his strengths weren't emphasized. And sure, some of that's on Vance for saying maybe they should have played zone. And when they played man and it didn't work, they did flip to just a soft zone and say I guess we got to kind of punt this one. And that's not what you want to do, and you need a better backup plan than that. But I just can't go out there and say these players should have done better, because again, this is a scheme that's based on players, not schematics.
But why I brought up comparing the year before he got there and the year after he was there is just for that, is to say, okay, what did he do with similar talent that another coordinator did? And 2 of the 3 teams he went to, the defense regressed significantly, and the 1 year that they improved, it was by 1 spot. So that's I think how to fairly best compare just how Vance is. And last week when we talked about this, I don't want to put words in your mouth. You said he was an above average to above average. And I said he's average at best. And you know what, Henry? I personally think, and I think what needs to happen, and I think what will happen with this hire, is expectations need to be changed. This is not going to be a top 10 defense.
You don't think so?
And I think by bringing Vance Joseph in, you're kind of solidifying that. Because he's never had a top 10 defense. This defense last year, Henry, and what people don't fail to realize and fail to accept, this was not a top 10 defense last year. They finished as the 14th or 15th best scoring defense in the NFL. They were slightly above average. Vance Joseph, I don't think, is a bad coach as a defensive coordinator. Like I said, I think he's average to slightly below average. You mix that with a slightly above average defense, you're looking at an average defense. But you know what? That's okay. And that's why I've advocated this week and will continue to advocate, use these resources this offseason primarily on the offensive side of the ball. It doesn't mean you can't give Vance and the defense weapons on the defense, but use most of the resources you have on the offensive side of the ball. The Broncos have tried and tried and tried to win on defense since winning Super Bowl 50. And you know what? You can win on defense occasionally. You can't consistently win on defense. They brought Sean Payton in this year to win on offense. So Vance Joseph, all you need to do is have an average defense. Now, fans are not going to like that because fans are used to a good defense. Fans kind of forget how the defense fell off the last 5 games of the season last year. They only remember when they were the top 5 defense for the first 12 games of the season. But in reality, they were an average defense. So Vance is going to get some heat when the Broncos defense is an average defense. But with Sean Payton making this hire, to me, it's clear. This is now an offensive team. Have an average defense. Don't do what you did last year and be the 31st defense in the NFL. Don't do what you've done 3 of the other years where you're the bottom 10 defense. You can't do that. Make this an average defense.
But my caveat would be I don't think he's average, like in terms of like he's the number 16 coordinator, whatever. I don't think that's because he just drags whatever defense to league average. I think it's because he runs a scheme that's basically just based on the players. I think what he does doesn't really matter all that much. He's not out there trying to mastermind, sneak guys in here, with the one exception, again, being like the third down rush packages occasionally. But for the most part, this is just a very simple scheme, one that Broncos fans loved, by the way, when it was Wade Phillips running it. And there's a difference because you only have Pat Surtain and not Aqib Talib and Chris Harris.
Why was there a difference, though, between fans loving what Wade did and why they didn't love what Vance brought to the table?
Because he won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, because of the success of the
exactly.
defense. The
success
led by Wade was very successful. What was the best defense in the NFL, one of the best defenses all time in 2015. Then in 2016, they were still the 4th best defense in the NFL that year. And then you get Vance Joseph there, 1 year removed from the best defense in the NFL, and they drop to a bottom 10 defense.
By scoring again, though.
And again, what else matters?
But again, you look at the advanced numbers, and they would say that defense was better than that. And you would look at the advanced numbers and say that what made, and there are a lot of things that made the Super Bowl defense really good. But you also, Darian Stewart was gone when Vance Joseph came in. And I guess Malik Jackson would have been gone that 2016 season too. Shaq Barrett, was he right after the Super Bowl? He left.
But Henry,
again, you're losing depth. You lose DeMarcus Ware. Did he retire right after? Or he have another season?
He was, I think, midway through that season.
Okay. So again, like you just have, it's not just about the numbers though, and I think that's the big piece to me here is that
I'm just confused. What is it about? Because you just say it's about scheme.
Yeah. It's the parts that I like about it, and again, I don't love the hire. The parts I like about it, Justin Simmons gets to do what he does best. There's no more of him in the box where we complained all season about him missing tackles. You sit him back, and that's kind of the starting point for the whole defense.
Okay.
Pat Surtain, you put him in position to be even more impactful on the game because he gets to man up against receivers. The best receiver. You're not saying like, hey, we need you to drop off here, we need you to do whatever. No, it's going to be pretty simple compared to that. I think for this team, it's a really, really good fit, and I think that it makes it very simple to build the rest of this defense out. I think that when you go into free agency, you kind of look through and say what matters in this scheme, and you don't say, well, this guy would add this and lose this and all these sorts of things. It's a very simple system, and if you go add another lockdown cornerback, there's no reason that he can't be really good. And again, I mean, that's Wade Phillips was the exact same thing. Remember, that's he didn't do a whole bunch of creative things. It was the third down blitz packages where both these guys kind of showed their own creativity, and Wade Phillips is better at that. Like, he is better at that. And that would be the biggest difference as coaches. Again, though, what he did was say, okay, Chris Harris, you're in man. Aqib Talib, you're in man. Bradley Roby, you're in man. No. We're going to blitz these guys, or we're going to drop these safeties to jump in here, whatever. I can't hate it. I can't hate it anymore. Now that I have moved past the whole, he was the Broncos coach, it's going to be awkward. I do think that even if he's not running as good of a system, as smart of a system as what the Broncos have had since he left, I do think that putting players in better positions, your best players in better positions, will balance some of that out.
You hope so.
And you think so, too, though.
Potentially.
I think so. Yeah.
I just look at the success he has or hasn't had, and I understand that that's where a lot of fans are. And let us know in the comment section if you're tuning in live, because obviously we disagree a little bit. Are you excited about this hire? Do you think he's going to be an above-average defensive coordinator, below-average defensive coordinator? And when you're doing that, hit us with a thumbs up. You guys are already crushing it. We'd really appreciate it. And a couple of other big news today. The Broncos are hiring Joe Lombardi to be part of their offensive staff, according to Mike Kliss. The title is to be determined, but offensive coordinator a possibility, according to Mike Kliss. I personally think he is going to be the offensive coordinator. It would make a lot of sense. He was Sean Payton's offensive coordinator for a decade in New Orleans. This one doesn't matter that much, so give Sean Payton someone that he's comfortable with, someone that he's worked with in this position before. That's been the expected move for a long time, Henry, and it looks like that's going to happen. Your quick reaction to that?
It makes sense. I think that the biggest thing about the offense this year is just implementing it. It's about teaching the terminology, how things work, that sort of stuff. And I think that bringing in Lombardi makes sense for that. You know, he can be just an extension of Sean Payton, who gets to spend more time doing those sorts of things. His fingerprints probably won't be all over what happens on Sundays directly, but in terms of teaching players how stuff works, that it makes sense to me. I think it's a good hire.
Yeah, and if Lombardi can help bring a Lombardi to Denver, then it's going to be
cool.
A great hire.
Named after his grandfather.
Yeah. Which a trophy was named after.
Yes.
Exactly. Okay, let's dive into Vance more, and we have an expert to do it. But first, I got to tell you about our friends over at Athletic Greens, where if you want to wake up and feel good, check out our friends over at Athletic Greens, because what Athletic Greens is going to give you is it's going to give you 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help get your day started right. And you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, how many pills do I have to take in order to get all of that? You don't. Yep. All you do is you take a tiny little scoop, put it in 8 ounces of water, stir it up, and you pound it in the morning. It takes less than a minute to do all of that, and you are just filling your body with great things to make you feel better and help your body get to its fullest potential. So you go to athleticgreens.com/Broncos. Not only will it take you to get Athletic Greens, but you'll get 1 free year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Those travel packs are so key, Henry. We're hitting the road next week. We're going to have our travel packs with us. And if you want travel packs, go to athleticgreens.com/Broncos.
And also, reach out to Backus and Shanker if somebody has done something that caused you harm. So any sort of injury case where you weren't at fault, whether it's a car accident or a motorcycle accident or like a lawnmower thing or whatever, you can call Backus and Shanker. Yeah, I know, that'd be terrible. It's like in that movie. What's that horror movie? It's like 10 years old now, maybe.
Is it about a lawnmower taking over the world?
It's not about it, but it includes a lawnmower, and it is messed up. But that person, or I think little girl even, should have reached out to Backus and Shanker to win some money, because if there is an accident that you weren't at fault for and you were harmed, they will win you money. They won't charge you until they win you your money. You can call 222-2222 for a free consultation. They'll work for free throughout the case, and then there's no bill unless they win your case. They've won over $1 billion to their clients in Colorado. They've been working in Colorado for more than 25 years, and they serve the whole state with lawyers in Denver, Aurora, Inglewood, Fort Collins, all over the place. So like I said, call 222-2222 to find out if you have a case for free.
All right, and let's talk to an expert on Vance Joseph as a defensive coordinator, because I covered him here when he was a head coach. Little different these past 4 years, and we've got our guy, Bo Brack, coming to us from Arizona. He covers the Cardinals. He's been around Vance Joseph's tenure as a Cardinals defensive coordinator. Bo, you got a big smile on your face. Is it because you're happy for the Broncos getting Vance, or are you happy that Vance is no longer in Arizona?
Look, the Vance Joseph divorce happened last week for the Cardinals fans, so I think that celebration, it ended, subsided a little bit, so I'm not coming on with this crap-eating grin just because Vance Joseph got another gig back in Denver, which, I think we can all say that Vance Joseph is back having the time of his life, like he was on Monday Night Football those years back.
You're absolutely right, Bo. So you and Johnny, and really Johnny, have not been afraid to say how tough it's been for Vance Joseph being the defensive coordinator, specifically over this last year. Why is that? Why were people in Arizona so happy that he left when he did last week?
Obviously, the results, and VJ is somebody that is pretty straight up and transparent that he realized that the results weren't there, at least this past season, because I think you can look at 2021 and say, hey, Vance Joseph actually coached up a pretty solid defense. It was, sandwiched in between three pretty ineffective seasons at the defensive coordinator position. But I think the main reason for frustration from this Arizona Cardinals fan base, and Johnny and myself included, was Vance Joseph was so reluctant to play young players that when it came to very imperative seasons to figure out if players were going to get paid and you were going to sign them to multi-year contracts, you didn't know enough about them. You saw guys exit this franchise far too often because by year 4, usually if they were beyond first-round picks, you're like, well, should they kind of give them the bag? Should they sign them to a multi-year deal? Is it safe? Are they players now? Because Vance Joseph, first years usually for players, they're used sparingly. I mean, Vance Joseph was gifted 2 first-round pick linebackers in Isaiah Simmons and Zaven Collins, and I don't feel like we know a whole lot about Isaiah Simmons and Zaven Collins going on to a new coaching staff, and I think a lot of people are refreshed by the idea that new Cardinals head coach Jonathan Gannon and his DC, Nick Rollis, will utilize them correctly, and maybe they can get something close to that first-round grade that the Cardinals kind of tabbed them with.
So how do you think that Isaiah Simmons should be used? Because my thought has kind of been like he doesn't really fit the man system. He's not great in man coverage, and that just kind of makes it tough for Vance Joseph to put him on the field.
Yeah, no, it is tough. But you go out there and you say, hey, he's an inside linebacker, and then you see him primarily play in the slot corner. It's like, well, yeah, of course he's going to be overmatched by the wide receiver threes of the world, and Travis Kelce, like he does to a lot of people, is going to dominate him. But then he's sent to the bench for the next 2 games, and he sees 30 combined snaps over 2 contests. I think that's just not enough. But hey, as far as the Broncos are concerned, no first-round pick, so you're not going to have the frustration of Vance Joseph not playing potential first-round pick. But you just didn't see the development there. I mean, I'm really hard-pressed to think of players that Vance Joseph, during his tenure here, developed. There are 2 guys that are free agents that could make their way to the Broncos via, Byron Murphy, a guy who ended last season with a back injury, and Zach Allen, who in probably his most healthy season was solid. He looked like kind of a baby J.J. Watt, swatting balls down at the line and getting to the quarterback and being disruptive. But I really can't think of somebody. I'm not going to give him credit for Budda Baker because he was there and developing and on the rise before VJ got there.
Yeah, very good points, Bo, and certainly some guys that Vance might bring over. And Broncos, this may be the most negative hire that I've seen the Broncos make at head coach, at coordinator, in my time covering the team since 2016. The fan base, for the most part, is very split, and I think that's even being fair to Vance. But when he was the defensive coordinator of the Cardinals, he had 2 seasons in which the Cardinals ranked 11th in points per game and 12th in points per game. Of course, also 2 bottom 5 finishes, including last year where they were the 2nd worst defense in the NFL. But to bring some positivity or some positive spin to this, what did he do well in those 2 years when they were a top 3rd defense?
He did a lot of great things as far as slowing down elite top flight wide receivers. I think if you looked at Cooper Kupp's performances against the Cardinals it was Cooper Kupp light. Like when he when he went on to win the Triple Crown in receiving, and when he played, the few games that he played this season, the Arizona Cardinals were able to bottle up Cooper Kupp, relative to what we're used to seeing recently from Cooper Kupp, shutting down guys like DK Metcalf. So Vance Joseph has a great plan as far as putting his cornerbacks, his defensive secondary in good position to take away the opposing team's top flight wide receiver. That's great. He also has the respect of all the players in that locker room. That's why you saw when Cliff Kingsbury was fired on Black Monday this season, that the players said, hey, let's look internally. Let's promote Vance Joseph, because they had so much respect for him and how he kind of commanded that. But he was probably the only adult as far as the coaching staff went, in recent history. So they just looked to him as the most respectable figure remaining. But also, I think that he did a great job. If you look at the tape from the season opener in 2021 against Tennessee, and the way he was able to get Chandler Jones in suitable matchups, favorable matchups, where he could rack up 5 sacks, he was just an absolute man possessed. Vance Joseph was moving him around, utilizing the rest of the defensive line and putting Chandler Jones in great favorable matchups. So I think he does pretty well with that. I used to think he was a guy that would kind of dial up some exotic blitzes and stuff like that, but that's kind of gone away. He's gotten a little bit more, he's gotten less aggressive. And I think that was unfortunate, because I think that was one of his strengths maybe 2 seasons ago, but I haven't seen much of that recently from VJ.
So it seemed like the final 3 candidates in Denver were Rex Ryan, Matt Patricia, and Vance Joseph. Obviously, Vance well, and you know those other guys a little bit because everybody does. How would you have ranked them if you were making the hire?
It's a dub. I mean, compared to that crew, I think that, and I said that recently on one of our podcasts in PHNX Cardinals, and when you're looking at who the finalists were, absolutely, Vance Joseph is the guy. I think that he is a good defensive coordinator. I won't shy off for that, and that's not too polarizing of a take. I think, relative to the offense here in Arizona, I think that you would say that his defensive group, his unit, played a lot better than the offensive side of the football. But at the same token, like you guys mentioned, the stats are there. The results are there. Gave up, the second most points in the league. But then the previous season, they're in top 10 in defensive DVOA. It was a little uneven performance. I just don't think he ever took this defense and elevated it to the point where it was a strength for this team. And, when you're coming off a 4-13 team, people want to see heads roll. And I don't think that there was any future for VJ left in the desert. I think he became far too polarizing, almost a parody, after everything started to kind of fall apart here. So, people are, celebrating. But at the same token, he was, when you watch Hard Knocks, you almost felt like Vance Joseph was the head coach of that team. Like he was the guy that was in control, where everybody else was just kind of on cruise control.
Kind of along those lines, Henry asking you, who would you choose between those 3? Henry and I disagree. Henry thinks that Vance is potentially an above-average defensive coordinator to average. I think he's average to below average. Where would you say he is as a defensive coordinator?
Yeah, that's a great question. His ceiling, to say above average, I think that he can produce above average performances. But when you look at the season as a whole, I think that you couldn't get that average, that median, to above average. It would be, you would mostly kind of top out at average. So I would agree with you on that. And I think that that's the issue. I would like to kind of see what he's going to do with maybe some top flight talent. I'm interested to see how he continues to develop PS2. And I hope that I'm not going to go in the camp that says he's going to stunt his growth, because I don't think he does that. And he's already going into his 3rd season, but I just don't know what he looks like, or I do know, unfortunately, too well what he looks like when he's gifted very talented draft prospects, and we've seen them fall at the wayside far too often.
When the Cardinals were getting beat defensively last year, what was going wrong?
Yeah, it was coverage off. They couldn't cover at all. J.J. Watt, Zach Allen were being very disruptive, winning at the line of scrimmage, getting into the backfield. making opposing quarterbacks uncomfortable. And even without any edge rush at all from their outside linebackers, their cover corners couldn't cover at all. And that was a big issue. And Vance Joseph knew that. And that might have taken away his aggressiveness that I talked about earlier. But it was a big-time issue, especially on third downs. They couldn't get off the field. The red zone was a big issue. And then, you can't really find any rhyme or reason, but it felt like any time the Cardinals did play, the few times they played complimentary football, when the offense got a score or put themselves in a position to get back in the game, you always felt like, oh, man, here comes a letdown from VJ's defense. And it happened a lot. And that was unfortunate. Like, opposing offenses were able to string together these back-breaking drives, and it just crushed the Cardinals, and it just didn't help. But, it was but like I said, you look at the offense versus the defense, you have to go in favor of VJ's defense, but that's grading on a curve.
I think it's great insight, Bo. Thank you so much for joining. I mean, you're as busy as us out there in Arizona. Thanks so much for taking some time. And I just have one more thing to say for you on the way out. Pew, pew, pew. Shots. Enjoy the Jonathan
Are you going at
Gannon
my guy,
era.
JG?
Oh, man, that was something. What'd you think of it?
I can't believe Jonathan Gannon, for having enthusiasm for his new job and meeting his new players, that he gets crushed in the media because he's pumped to be there. Zach, you of all people should know about this. Like, when you come and you bring the energy and then people are turned off by it, it's not your problem. It's not Jonathan Gannon's problem. It's the people that can't match that. And you know what? They just did their defensive coordinator introductory press conference yesterday, and Gannon came in with energy unlike I've ever seen. He came in and goes, hey, 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 and he's rallying the media members up, getting them pumped up about it. So I'm all on board for it, especially because the previous regime was so way too cool for the room. And then to kind of get the polar opposite of that, I think it's refreshing. I think it's what the Cardinals need. But he's also, he's got an edge to him. He's got kind of a hard-ass edge to him. I've equated it to kind of like he's a fun, cheap first date. Things are going really well. You had low expectations, but man, you're having the time of your life, and might turn into something serious.
You know, I love it, and I'm pulling for you guys and for Jonathan Gannon. It reminds me a lot of Nathaniel Hackett last year, not in a bad way. First, Nathaniel Hackett, brought so much energy, so much positivity, and everyone wanted to see him succeed because a lot of times, you mentioned it, the coaches in the NFL are too cool for fans, are too cool for media members, are too cool for it. They're bigger than it, and it's really cool when someone comes in with energy and just a different type. I really wish that Nathaniel Hackett would have worked out here, and so I'm pulling for Jonathan again. I had to bring it up, Bo.
Of course, no, it's fun, man. I mean, it like we always say, at least it's interesting, and we're talking about it, you guys are talking about it, and the Arizona Cardinals after horrible season. It's it's not the worst problem to have that people are poking fun of how enthusiastic your head coach is.
No, it's not at all, and enjoy that down there. Thanks so much for your time, Bo. We'll talk to you soon. We'll see you next week, actually.
See you next week.
See you, Bo. All right. Bo, I think that was, he brought really good perspective.
Yeah.
Because obviously, he mentioned in his first answer, the celebration of Vance Joseph leaving happened last week. But then he brought some positive things about what Vance was able to do when the defense was playing well. I think a very interesting point. And I think this might be, this can't be good news, but Vance Joseph's biggest weakness, according to Bo, was being able to develop young talent. The Broncos' young talent there's probably not going to be an influx of young talent on the offensive side anytime soon, at least with players that you're really counting to take a big step up. Now, one person that you may be a little concerned about, Nick Bonito, the young talent that was there last year that didn't develop. I am concerned about Vance coming here and being able to develop him, but no first-round pick this year. No first-round pick next or second-round pick this year. Next year, Henry, you got to imagine that they're going to go offensive line, go to the offensive side. So if that's the biggest criticism that they had with Vance out there and being able to put young players in the right position, that shouldn't really be that much of a concern here because simply he's just not going to have that much young talent to have to work with.
And on top of that, you think about what that young talent is. Their last two first-round picks, Zaven Collins, Isaiah Simmons. Talented players. The question all throughout the draft process is what you do with them. With Isaiah Simmons, some people are saying you should just play him at free safety. He should be playing like Justin Simmons. Some say he should be an edge rusher. Some say inside linebacker. Some say use him in the slot. And, the appeal is that he can do all those different things. And, he's a size speed freak. And when you can run a 4.3 and you're that big, it's tough not to draft you. And Zaven Collins is along those same lines too. What I think is a challenge is figuring out where to even put them. And you see them move around. Like you said, played him in the slot a little bit, rushed him off the edge a little bit, played him an inside linebacker a little bit. Zaven Collins was brought in to be Chandler Jones' replacement. Now he's an inside linebacker. And it's again, you have to find a way to make him work. That's your job. But also, I can't sit here and say, oh, here's what I would do.
But that's it. That's what Bo said, was that
True.
he was putting them in the wrong positions, and it was very clear. Yeah. And then those players
he was putting him in so many positions, though.
Well, those players weren't living up to their potential because they weren't put in the right positions. And to your point, if they were put in so many positions, that translates to too many positions when it doesn't work out for a young player. And then what just hurts Vance even more is then you see a player be drafted behind where Isaiah Simmons was drafted and Micah Parsons, and he's this do-it-all player. And I'm not saying that they're the same players. Yeah. No. But you go and see Micah Parsons have success by playing over the field, and you just see, and you hear from Bo, you hear from Johnny, you hear from people in PHNX that he was just putting these young players in the wrong position and then benching them when they weren't having success. So that to me, though, if that's the worst thing about Vance being a defensive coordinator, Sean and George Payton better take that into account when deciding how they're going to use their resources, specifically on rookies and younger players. But to me, that doesn't impact the Broncos as much as it would any other team that Vance Joseph would have joined. Okay, Henry, so I want to ask you now, what makes this the best, or what in 2 years from now, what does Vance Joseph have to do for this to be a good hire, to be a successful hire?
Top 10 defenses. Let's say finish top 10 both years in DVOA and points. If you do that, then that's a good hire. Otherwise, it's going to be a tough conversation.
That, and this is just going to be the difference with us. You and I are just going to have very different expectations. That would be a great hire. A fantastic hire, because we're sitting here, and you do have to keep intact with knowledge of where we are. It's February 23rd right now. Some teams hired their defensive coordinator right after they got their head coach weeks ago. So we're sitting here 2 months after the season ended, and the Broncos were just able to hire their coordinator. And I don't put this at a fault to Sean Payton. Vance Joseph's the only person that they could have hired that would have made sense for hiring right now. And the reason is because Vance wasn't allowed to interview until he was let out of his contract last Thursday. The Broncos jumped right on him, interviewed him in the building next Friday. Then he said, I want to go interview with the Philadelphia Eagles. He did that on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then they hired him today. So they hired Vance as quickly as they could have. So no issues there. But it wasn't like they were able to hire anyone they wanted, since they wanted to wait for Vance. So my expectations are, if they're an above average defense, meaning if they're 15th or better, then that will be a successful hire. Exceptional hire? No, obviously not. I think he'd have to get into that top 5, top 10 defense to be an exceptional hire. But also, I am so afraid to say that for it to be a successful hire, he needs a top 10 defense, because he's never done it before. And sure, he hasn't had the most talent at times in Arizona, a lot of injuries that he had to deal with last year, but he did take over a defense with Aqib Talib, Chris Harris Jr., TJ Watt. He took over a defense with so much talent, Von Miller on the defensive side of the ball, and 1 year removed from being one of the all-time great defenses, and they ended up being a bottom 10 defense. So that's why he has had talent at times. The fact that he's never been able to produce a top 10 defense is why I can't put those expectations for him, especially when last year they were the 14th best defense in the NFL, and I think that talent is only going to get worse moving forward. So I think it's unrealistic to expect a jump in a positive direction when I think the resources are going to be going the other way.
And my twist of that would be, I'm not grading him on a curve. I'm not going to say he was fine before, so you can only ask him to be fine. For this to be a good hire, he has to be good. It can't be a good hire if he's he's all right. That's an all right hire. for it to be a good hire, he needs to put out good results.
And something that he's never done, so I hope he's able to do that. But I also think that if he is a top half of the league defense, if he's able to do that, the Broncos will be a winning team. The Broncos will be a playoff team. Because if not, then that means Sean Payton's failing on the offensive side of the ball. And Sean Payton has proved that if he has an okay defense, an average defense, that his team is going to make the playoffs. When he hasn't made the playoffs with New Orleans, he's had a very bad defense. If the Broncos are average, Sean Payton has proved that they will make the playoffs. So much more news happening, Henry.
Yep.
Let's dive into it. But first, I've got to tell you about our friends over at DraftKings Sportsbook. You want to bet on the Broncos win total? If you like the Vance Joseph hire, you can bet the over. If you don't like it, bet the under. They'll have those odds plus so many more odds up on DraftKings Sportsbook. But the Nuggets are back in action tonight. Henry, if you want to get in on the Nuggets second half of the season stretch, you can do that over at DraftKings Sportsbook. Bet on the Avs as well. You want to get in on everything DraftKings has, so check them out. Use that promo code DNVR when you sign up. They've got same-game parlays. I know everyone here is a big fan of same-game parlays, but they're also going to boost those same-game parlays, so check out DraftKings. Make sure to opt into those boosts. Check them out. Use that promo code DNVR. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See our show notes for details. Void in Ohio. And if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700 and make sure to see our show notes for details.
Yes. Also, somebody in the chat saying that the movie I was thinking about earlier was Sinister.
Okay.
That is correct. That was correct.
That wouldn't have resonated with me at all.
You should watch it. I think it's right up your alley. Also, if you're looking for any gifts, even gifts for yourself, there's more new stuff at foco.com. Just looking, there's tennis shoes. There are all white tennis shoes, which are popular around DNVR, but they just have Broncos written on the side and like the script font. They're pretty cool.
Ooh.
I'm assuming these things are new because I haven't seen them and I go on this website a lot, but there's like this suede Broncos cowboy hat.
Oh, okay.
Which, I feel like at some
Broncos
point in my life,
logo or what?
Yeah, it has like a little Broncos logo. It has a little
okay, I like it.
Yeah,
I feel like mascot, or I'm sorry, not mascot, Thunder. Whoever rides Thunder at the stadium wears a hat just like that.
Ooh, they should.
Yeah.
Definitely should. But yeah, there's still all the Christmas ornaments and all that sort of stuff if you're into planning way in advance. There's slippers, there's sweatpants, there's Legos, there's towels, there's other sweatpants, there's lunch boxes and bags, and just about anything you could think of with the Broncos logo on it, you can find at foco.com. And if you use the code DNVR, you'll get 10% off all non-sale items. And there's a link to Foco in the description of this YouTube show, the description of this podcast. So if you're giving any gifts or just interested in buying some stuff for yourself, head over to Foco.
All right, and let's head over to the comment section.
Yes.
Talk to the people. A lot of people want to talk today.
Yep.
Let's hop into the Super Chats first. And the first Super Chat coming in from Jacob Weddle says, the identity of this team has changed. It's all about Sean Payton's offense, as it should be. The defense now doesn't have to carry and be great anymore. They just have to be good enough. With Vance, they can be good enough. It's so funny how Henry and I view both of these things different. We view the hiring of Vance Joseph different, and where Henry's higher on it.
I'm fine with it.
But then we view the expectations also differently, and it's just interesting how that blends together, where I'm giving a little bit of slack to Vance. You're holding him to a higher standard, maybe because you think it's a better hire too. But Jacob, I'm right there with you. I do think that this is now an offensive team, and unless the defense is awful, if the team's not winning, it's because of the offense now.
Yeah, and the caveat to that, though, I still think is that you're not going to be a good team unless you're good at both. Like, you can't set the standard at, let's just be all right there, unless you're accepting that you're rebuilding. I mean, you look at what the Eagles were last year. They had one of the very best defenses in the league to go with one of the best offenses. And more often than not, you need both of those two things to go together if you're going to actually be really, really good. You look at the Rams the year before. Who won that Super Bowl? I mean, that's just the way football works. You can't punt on one side of the ball.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. You can't be awful on one side of the ball. If you're average on one side of the ball and top 10, you're going to have a winning record. You're going to likely be in the playoffs unless, it's a super competitive AFC or something like that.
Yeah, but again, I think that right now, if you're setting the bar at the playoffs, that's fine. Long term, you are going to be better than that.
No, just again, look at Sean Payton and the Saints. They
won
Saints,
one Super Bowl.
What do you mean?
They won one Super Bowl. Like, again, like they were good, but you have to be good on both sides of the ball if you're going to be winning championships.
When you look at Sean Payton's teams, every single time that he had an okay defense, an average defense, they had a winning record.
Yeah.
Because the offense drove that team.
Yep.
When they had a terrible defense is when they had the 4, 5, 7, and 9 seasons. So that should translate here. You are getting an offensive genius. You should be injecting the offense with a lot of resources through the draft in the coming years, through free agency in the coming years. This team is you did not hire Sean Payton to be a balanced team. You hired them to dominate on offense and be a good enough defense.
If you don't have a good defense, you can't win championships. That's just where it's at.
You got to be average to be a winning team.
They were fine.
Who?
They were fine.
They were average.
Yeah,
they were an
they
average,
were.
and
again,
at times
but,
they
but
did
again,
step up,
but also,
statistically they were an average defense. And the offense, obviously, I don't think anyone's expecting Sean Payton to be Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, the best offense in the NFL. But Sean Payton is expected in time to make this a great top 5 offense.
Yeah,
and then follow that Chiefs formula of a great offense with a good enough defense.
Chiefs formula doesn't work without Patrick Mahomes, though. That's where, like, you look at the Eagles, you look at the Rams, you look at
Henry,
even the
what
Bengals.
I'm saying is it did for 15 years with Sean Payton.
But they won one championship. Again, we're on the same page, I think. You can go to the playoffs with an average defense. What I'm saying is to win a championship.
Henry, we're not talking about building a team right now based off that's ready to go win back-to-back Super Bowls. We're talking about a team that needs to be competitive, needs to have winning records.
That's what I said,
right now.
is that for this year, if you're trying to make the playoffs, that's a good goal, and that's good enough. Long term, when you're trying to win championships, you need to have a good defense.
You do.
Yep,
you do.
There you go.
But right now, where we're at, I'm not thinking of how can they build a championship team this year. And if they are, then Vance Joseph is not the right guy because he's proved that he cannot be a top 10 defense.
He hasn't proven that, though. He's run 6 defenses.
He's run 7 different defenses, and none of them have been in the top 10. That is proof right there.
So you think there's no chance it happens this year?
No, I'm just saying he hasn't proved it.
You say he's proven he hasn't. He can't.
He's proven that he hasn't. Yes.
No,
he's proven
he hasn't and that he can't.
I didn't say that he can't.
I think you did.
He's proven that he hasn't done that.
Yeah. Yes, he hasn't done it.
Exactly.
You don't even need the proven part in there. He hasn't done it.
Exactly. He has not done it.
No, but I think it's very possible, especially with a team. There's a reason why he chose it. I can't remember who the report was, but that he thought he was in a good spot to land the Eagles job and the Broncos job and chose the Broncos. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it makes sense to take Justin Simmons and Pat Surtain for his particular system.
The something else that makes sense with that is the Eagles are going to regress very, very, very likely, regardless of who their defensive coordinator is. Imagine how much heat you get for being the defensive coordinator when people don't want to look at the nuances, and they see that the Eagles' defense falls from the best defense in the NFL to an average defense, and that was your first year taking over. You don't want that drop. Broncos, average defense last year, statistically. If he stays right there, well, then there's no drop-off. If he goes up a little bit, well, then he actually helped them take a step in the right direction. So I think that's also another reason why this job was appealing.
Definitely.
And you get to work with Sean Payton, which is appealing. Again, when Sean Payton has had an average defense, he's made the playoffs. And so that's Vance Joseph's goal. He does not have to build the defense that's going to take them to the playoffs.
I think those are two different, real quick, my last one. I think those are two different things. No, he doesn't need to build a defense to go to the playoffs. But if Vance Joseph is sitting there saying, like, how can we get to top 16? I would be very disappointed.
Obviously, he's not
so the goal should be higher.
Saying that, but
the goal should be higher.
In the back, he's not coming in and saying, let's build an average defense.
Exactly.
But he does know this defense does not have to be great. Like it was, I had to have a good defense here when I was the head coach in order to be successful. I had to have an elite defense because this offense stunk. That's not the case anymore, or it shouldn't be, or else Sean Payton's failing as a head coach and an offensive guy. All right, next super chat from Kyle Garcia says, Vance Joseph had players like Chris Harris Jr., Talib, Simmons, Wolf, Shaq Barrett, Von Miller, Bradley Chubb, Darian Stewart. How do we honestly think he'll do better with this team? Good question, Kyle. Henry?
Yeah. I mean, I think that you just say, look at what he's going to ask these guys to do. You hear what Bo said about what was the issue last year. They didn't have guys who could cover. And if they had guys who could cover, they would have been fine. But when all of your cornerbacks are getting beat, when Byron Murphy is statistically playing worse than Damari Mathis, and obviously that means playing worse than Ronald Darby, playing worse than Pat Surtain, and he's your top guy, like the system just isn't going to work there. And so, again, I think that if you get into comparisons here, that's an easy thing to do, but I'm not sure that it's really worth it. I think that the best thing to do is just say, what is Pat Surtain going to be asked to do? What is Justin Simmons going to be asked to do? Go through the whole team and say, what do you need? And I think at this point, what you say you need is, I would go after a Patrick Peterson, somebody who's worked with Vance Joseph before, somebody who is a press man corner who, just played the most snaps in a single season of his career, had his best passer rating allowed since 2015, third best of his career. I think that bringing somebody like that, then all of a sudden you have the depth in your room and you have this pretty clear structure that really aligns with how the defense is built. Why would that be different than when you had Chris Harris and Aqib Talib? Because you're just trying, again, it's re-rolling the dice and saying that those results were less than you'd expect, that they caught some bad breaks somewhere.
Man, yeah, you're giving them all the benefit of the doubt. And I've kind of pushed back to that, but we know where each of us stand. Yep. Next one from Rickert says, besides Vance Joseph and Joe Lombardi, are more coaches announced? Yes, there's a lot more coaches that have been announced. And before we get to those, let's look at some more drama that unfolded last night. Henry, right when we got finished with the pod, a couple of hours later, it was announced that Matt Patricia was in the building interviewing for the Broncos defensive coordinator job. I mean, people were shook when they saw that Vance Joseph was interviewing for the Broncos job. They were shook when they saw that Rex Ryan was interviewing for the job. They were really shook when they saw that Matt Patricia was interviewing for the job. We thought we were going to come in today and talk about who's the best option between those three. But now you don't have to worry about Matt Patricia becoming the Broncos defensive coordinator. There were some thoughts that he was going to become the linebackers coach. We found out that is not the case, but then more drama happened. About 9 p.m. last night, there was a tweet from Eric Goodman. Here, can we pull that up? It said, any chance we can make that bigger? Well, anyways, you guys can read it on the screen right there. Yeah, here, it's okay. Essentially, it said, Sean Payton has hired 5 coaches, 16 vacancies left, and we're almost at the end of February. He said, this is embarrassing. Sean Payton sees this tweet, gets hold of it, and then responds with this at 9 p.m. last night. Sean Payton says, 16 with 5 to go. We'll fill you in when we're ready. The coach chirping back online saying, Eric Goodman, you have the wrong information. We have 16 spots filled with only 5 left. And this wasn't just news to Eric. This was news to everyone. Totally. Because the information that Eric put out there was what has been public knowledge, that not a lot of coaches had been hired. And Sean Payton wanted to make it known that he's been doing his work. He hasn't been sitting back. And so what'd you think of that, first off?
What I really like about it is that he wasn't a dick about it. Like, I think it would have been really easy to be like he was so simple. 16 with 5 to go. We'll fill you in when we're ready. Like, it's just the most simple thing.
I disagree with.
You think so?
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. I think it's probably a dick move to respond in the first place. But I think what he said was just like, it's not like he said, you don't know what you're talking about,
Yeah, the we'll fill you in when we're ready is definitely a shot.
Okay, I don't see it that way. But see, I mean, I don't know. I'm fine with it. It's fun. It gets people going on Twitter. Like, it's another one of those things where it's like, throw it in the bucket of I don't really care, but it was a fun 30 seconds when I saw it.
I think it was a fun longer than 30 seconds.
Okay.
And
we did talk longer.
And here's the thing. Sean Payton definitely got the fans riled up. This was definitely something for the fans. Yeah. Fans totally embraced it. A little irony, because 2.5 weeks ago, he said we're not going to be doing as much social media stuff with this. Just know we're working. And then he actually uses his own personal Twitter account on social media to say that they're working and to show that they're working. But then he's backed it up. In the past 12, 15 hours since then, the Broncos have started announcing a lot of their coaching moves. I should say they are not announcing it, but we're finding out a lot of their coaching moves. Henry, we found out this morning that the Broncos have hired Kiri Colbert to be their wide receivers coach. Actually played for the Broncos in 2 games, didn't have any catches, was in the NFL for many years, then was a college coach, has only coached in college, but I like that. I like that Sean Payton's, especially on the offensive side of the ball, bringing someone in who's going to be fresh to Sean Payton, bring some new ideas. So we found out that they do have a wide receivers coach, obviously. We found out the Vance Joseph news. And then we found out, since we've been going live on this pod, we mentioned it, Joe Lombardi is going to be part of their offensive staff. I expect him to be their offensive coordinator. I like the move. Henry, you've said that you've liked the move already. I mentioned Matt Patricia. There was some belief that people thought he was going to be the linebackers coach, come to Denver and do that. Well, Mike Kliss said that the Broncos are hiring Michael Wilhoit as their linebackers coach. He was with Sean Payton in New Orleans in 2019 and 2020, and he spent the last 2 years as a Chargers linebacker coach. So he's coming in. Probably now doesn't leave room for Matt Patricia. We'll see on that. And then the other news that we officially found out today, we've all been expecting it, but defensive line coach Marcus Dixon and Christian Parker, the defensive backs coach, are both going to be back in their positions. They're the only 2 holdovers from position coaches from last year's staff to this year's staff.
Yeah, I think that, let me think. Yeah, I mean, of any position coaches, those probably would be the top 2. Peter Hansen, the linebackers coach, would have been the other one really in the conversation. So, yeah, I mean, that held on to their young talent. Christian Parker obviously interviewed for the defensive coordinator job. Marcus Dixon is, I think that was his first season as a position coach, I believe. And, I mean, Deshaun Williams, new career high in sacks. DJ Jones played well. I thought Matt Henningsen played well. I don't think that he's as much of a, like, oh my goodness, can you believe all that happened? But I think better results than you expected from his group. And in his first year, you'll love to see him stick around.
Yeah, and the founder of the Dark Side
True,
T-shirts
that is right.
And slogan,
that is right.
Marcus Dixon, a very good young coach, just as well as Christian Parker. So I think those are good moves. Those were Vance Joseph's first 2 moves. Now, we knew over the weekend that whoever the coordinator was going to keep him, but Vance Joseph made that official. So those are the updates to the coaching staff right now. And Sean Payton, 24 hours. We pretty much know the coaching staff. We're still waiting on a couple of things, quarterbacks coach, running backs coach, but we're going to find those things out. But the biggest one that we were waiting on, the biggest domino, was defensive coordinator. Now we know who's going to lead the offense. It's obviously Sean Payton. The defense, it's Vance Joseph. Special teams, it's Ben Kotwika, along with Westhoff being the assistant head coach to Vance Joseph. Offensive coordinator, doesn't really matter, and it probably is going to be Joe Lombardi. So for the most part, Henry, in 24 hours, we went from what's going on to, okay, here we go. Let's roll into the combine with this staff.
Yeah. And again, outside of Vance Joseph, I think pretty good staff across the board. And with Vance,
outside of Vance, he's an above-average coordinator, Henry.
Give him a C+, B- for hiring him. It was fine.
There we go. All right, let's hop into some comments on the website. First one, Kyler says, all right, guys, I'm officially hitting the panic button on Sean Payton's staff. Rex Ryan, Vance Joseph, Matt Patricia. Interestingly, bad options in our strongest side of the ball. At this point, give me Christian Parker. I'd rather root for the new guy with upside than deal with the drama from these subpar and washed-up veteran coaches. On the offensive side, it looks like we'll end up with another Justin Outen type who actually isn't offensive quality or offensive coordinating material, but is just there to do what Payton says. None of this inspires confidence. Obviously, this was before the news that Vance was the DC, but clearly I think his sentiment continues to hold. The only pushback I'll give is Joe Lombardi. To me, good hire. I don't think I'm going to say a great hire for Sean Payton, but he's had a lot of success with Sean Payton in the past, and you can give I'm totally okay with Sean Payton getting someone who's very comfortable with at that position.
Totally. And you just need to build the culture and teach everybody how things work and how certain routes are run and how the quarterbacks do X, Y, and Z, and he can do all those things. And again, like, it was pretty obvious at this point that they weren't going to get the Grand Slams. You know, Vic Fangio's off the board, Brian Flores is off the board, and so when you're working with who do you want out of that next tier, it's fine. They did fine.
And Vance Joseph could be a scapegoat in 1 year.
True.
If things don't go well, Sean Payton's going to sell it to George Payton and the ownership as, well, look, I mean, I was hired so late in the process. Vic Fangio, I couldn't get in on him. Brian Flores, he took a job before I could even interview with him. Vance was my third or fourth option. Let's move on from him. They do that at the beginning of January. Then he can sell the team that now I can actually get my number one option. That's if things don't go right. But I think it's clear who would be the scapegoat if things don't go right, and I think it would be Vance.
Yep. And as to the Christian Parker part, again, there is just some risk there when you're hiring a 31-year-old. Vance Joseph, what are the expectations? The expectations might not be a top 10 defense. That's more of a goal maybe than an expectation. But he does know what he's doing. And there was little chance that I'll say I'd be very surprised if they finished below 22nd in the league, Christian Parker, I think anything's on the table.
I just wish that Vance didn't have multiple bottom five defensive finishes, because then I could kind of get more behind you with there's more risk with Christian Parker. I actually don't know if there's that much more risk there. I see what you're saying, but I just think Vance Joseph's past doesn't fully back it up. Next one from the Count says, some of you may be wondering why Numbies is so hardcore about bolstering the offensive line. Let me give you a bit of perspective. I just listened to the May 8th, 2019 BSM podcast where Zach and RK were debating the potential starting lineup of Ron Leary, Juwan James, and Elijah Wilkinson. Let's just say it's been a long damn time since the trenches on the offensive line has been fortified properly. I hear you, Zach. Love the Count. Man, just think about that. They had Juwan James, Elijah Wilkinson, Ron Leary, and they still haven't drafted an offensive lineman since.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, wow.
It is crazy.
It is. I hope that changes in the third round this year.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Broncos Only says, I've been leery of every one of those bumps, most of all, Ron himself. My favorite last year was Tom Incompetent. He
was awful. He was like, and I feel bad for the guy, and he's battling injuries and all that sort of stuff. So he has plenty of reasons for him to not play his best. But when he got into that one game he played in,
did he play like 17 snaps the whole season?
Yeah. And that's why. Oh, give me a second. I want to pull these numbers up.
Okay. Who is he talking about?
Ron Leary. I would imagine.
Oh, that must have been a response to the count or something. Yeah. All right. When you pull those up, I'm going to read the next one.
Oh, there we go.
Oh,
18 snaps he's on the field.
I was one snap off. Look at that.
18 snaps on the field. 8 times he was pass blocking. That can't be. No. That's wrong. That's 18 pass blocking snaps. 18 pass blocking snaps. Gave up 3 sacks. Again, they were all in that one game against Arizona.
Jeez,
3 sacks and 18 snaps, and then he got pulled.
Arizona, who we just heard.
Yep.
It's a very bad defense.
Yep.
Nash Bronco says, not a huge fan of the Vance Joseph hire. I can look past his past experiences here, bad as they are, because this franchise has changed hands, but I'm just not impressed by his work as defensive coordinator. I'm sure you guys talked about it a bunch today, so I won't try to make any points. I do love that our head coach is on Twitter shutting down haters. See, I knew fans absolutely ate that up.
How could they not?
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Next one from Cosmo Kelly says, never forget the time that Bill O'Brien called Vance a dumb F in the middle of the game, and Bill ain't that bright, so if he's calling you a dumb, wow, D- higher.
See, I took that the other way.
Yeah, me too.
It's like, wait, Bill O'Brien doesn't like him.
Right.
Like, yeah, I mean, that's I don't know. Those Patriots coaches, I went down the whole Matt Patricia deep dive last night. The fact that every single one of those stories is the exact same for every assistant is wild. Like, Matt Patricia goes into Detroit, pisses off Darius Slay, demands a trade, pisses off these other guys, they want to leave. Bill O'Brien goes into Arizona, pisses off DeAndre Hopkins, demands a trade. Everybody knows about Josh McDaniels. Like, it is the exact same thing over and over again. And it actually got me thinking that, like, that's obviously, so Bill Belichick, part of the Bill Parcells tree, that's kind of the hard-nosed, whatever, we don't give an F what you think. You're a player, you get treated this way. The only other real branch of that tree that's still around is Sean Payton. And Sean Payton is known for being that super hard-nosed, kind of just asshole type coach to players. I mean, Latavius even said it, like, yeah, we worked harder than I've ever worked any other time in my career. So I don't know. It got me thinking.
Sean Payton told Latavius, "Be careful what you ask Santa for."
Exactly. So it is kind of an interesting dynamic because it is. I don't know. It's one thing when you're Bill Belichick or even Sean Payton in New Orleans and you build this over time. And so every year you have 40 of your 53 players are back and used to it and can set the tone, and those other 13 are like, wait, this is weird, and everybody else can just shut them down because they have the numbers. When Matt Patricia goes to Detroit, or when Josh McDaniels goes to Denver or Vegas, Bill O'Brien goes to the Texans, like, the numbers are flipped. And so everybody's like, wait, what are you talking about? You can't treat us like this. And I don't know. I think Sean Payton's going to be fine, but it did get me thinking.
Okay, you asked our guy Bo Brock this. I want to ask you, between Vance Joseph, Matt Patricia, and Rex Ryan, who would have been the best defensive coordinator hire for this team?
That's a tough question. Again, with Matt Patricia, I didn't realize this, and I don't know if you did either, but there were like the rape accusations in 1996, and like
the case. I believe the case was dropped because the victim said she didn't want to have to go through the emotional process of a trial,
and so
very concerning.
It is concerning.
Not for the victim, but just in terms of what that case was like.
Exactly. And so indicted by the grand jury and all that stuff before all this happens. And so you do have that piece before you even get into, do you want Matt Patricia around? Like, that's either like it's acceptable or it's unacceptable type deal. It's not really like he's this good, but it's either a yes or no. So,
well, and really quick, to be fair, since you brought it up about Rex, Vance also has some allegations against him as well in his past.
Yep. Again, didn't press charges there, and so is what it is. When his last year as a coach at Colorado, he was suspended for sexual misconduct. That was 2004 or something like that. But the point is, if you decide that it's acceptable to bring those people in, which again, that's their decision, and
that's fair.
You have the thoughts that you think.
What you're saying.
But football-wise, just purely schematically, I think I would have been really curious what Matt Patricia would do. I think that there's more exotic looks. I think what he and Vance Joseph do are very similar. I think that's why it kind of makes sense for him to be the rumored linebackers coach, which is now kind of gone. But they're both single high defenses, press man coverage outside for the most part. Rex Ryan felt like probably the biggest variance. He could be an incredible defensive coach because that's what he was known as for 15 years in the NFL. And there's also a chance that he's just kind of washed out of the game and all that sort of stuff. So I think I'd go. I don't think I could have said no to Rex Ryan. I think that given that everything was kind of give me Rex Ryan.
Fair.
Yeah.
And I kind of like how you answered that, where it's not like absolutely this guy.
Yeah.
Because there's. Man, I don't even know if I want to say there's like great positives, but there's selling points.
Yeah.
For all of them, I guess. There's also big time concerns. The crazy thing is Vance Joseph is the most stable one. You know what you're getting from him more than you knew what you were getting from Rex Ryan or Matt Patricia. Matt Patricia has, well, I guess I shouldn't say has, failed miserably when he wasn't with the Patriots. When he was with the Patriots and the defensive coordinator, they were top 10 every single year, but massive caveat being that Bill Belichick is fantastic with dealing with the defense. And how much of that was Bill? Well, if you look at the success or lack of success that Patricia had when he left Bill Belichick, you would say it was all Bill Belichick. So, I mean, that was a total roll of the dice if they would have gone with Patricia. And Rex Ryan hasn't coached in 7 years in the NFL. So that's a big roll of the dice. And he hasn't been a successful defensive coordinator in 15 years. So talk about just massive gambles. Both of them, at least Vance Joseph has been coaching in the NFL
what a high standard.
The past 7 years. Seriously, though, at least he's been coaching on the defensive side the past 2 years. Matt Patricia has been on the offensive side the past 2 years, which is just crazy. So as wild as it is.
Like the stories that come out of Boston or wherever the hell they are, they're insane. Like there's like, they spent the whole offseason trying to change the entire offense to the Shanahan wide zone, despite nobody on the staff ever having been a part of any of those Shanahan staffs or McVay staffs or anything.
That's tough.
And then they get halfway through and realize they can't really run the play action well, and so they just throw all that out. So they wound up like 5th in the NFL in outside zone runs. bottom 3 in the NFL in the play actions off those. They couldn't figure out how to run. So, I mean, that was all a mess. And I think
It was.
that was the kind of stuff where I was like, you know what? I'm willing to throw some of that out. Like, if you're comparing to Vic Fangio, you don't. But I would be willing to say, like, you know what? The defensive work speaks for itself. The system, all that sort of stuff makes sense. It's a nice little counter to where everybody else is going in the NFL, which Vance Joseph is too. Again, it's a single high defense instead of too high. And I think that changing things up, especially with the Broncos personnel, makes sense. But I don't know. They all have their flaws. Football wise.
Yeah.
On top of everything else.
Absolutely. They do. Bronco Tiz says, welcome back to Denver, VJ. Got a raw deal last time around. Could have used a better staff, and his quarterbacks were not starting caliber. I know Hank will probably fight me, but I love the VJ hire. What do you mean? Hank loves the VJ hire. Hank's not
a lover.
Hank's not a hater about this. Now I know why it took so long to announce. Had to keep the news quiet while VJ gave the Eagles their courtesy interviews. I actually disagree with that, Bronco Tiz.
I think you wanted to hear what they had to say.
Absolutely. And wouldn't you want to know what the NFC champion has to say to you, and you want to understand the players that they're trying to bring back, the players that they know they have to let go? I think if those were courtesy interviews, Vance would have signed with the team over this past weekend. The Broncos wouldn't have let them leave the building. I think it's also very clear, Henry, that Vance was their number one guy at this point in the process. Right when Vance finishes his interviews, they hired him to be their defensive coordinator.
I think that was pretty obvious. Again, you brought up earlier with how the whole timeline worked out, but again, with the other report, and I wish I remember who said it, but somebody said Vance thought he was in good standing with both of these teams.
I think it was Kliss.
Was it Kliss who said that? And so he chose the Broncos. And again, like, the reason he wouldn't want to come to the Broncos, things went horribly last time. The reason he would, having a lockdown corner and a safety like Justin Simmons, as I've said probably 15 times on this podcast, and I promise I'll shut up, it's a good fit for a scheme. Like, those are two really important positions.
And not
for
as
him.
much expectations.
There is that too.
Especially compared with the NFC champion Philadelphia Eagles.
And, I mean, they've been bad for so long. Partially his fault at the very least.
Yeah.
Bringing in Sean Payton and being part of Sean Payton's staff, that's not a bad idea, especially if you're trying to be a head coach. Because, again, you talk about, like, Bill Parcells, potentially the best coaching tree in the history of the NFL. And, you know, Sean Payton, Bill Belichick do some heavy lifting there. But to kind of branch off of that and join in and see how Sean Payton runs a program, he will learn a lot more from him than he would have learned with, or he had learned with Cliff Kingsbury, for example.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Arvada Luke says, VJ back. That's weird, right? If the defense performs again and this move works out, does that implicate the prior front office as having more blame in the Broncos' troubles over the last half decade? It seems to me that there was a lot of consideration given to VJ and Vic to come back here. Does any of that change your perspective on management's role in the disaster? Arvada Luke. That last part, no. The consideration to bring Vic and or Vance Joseph back as defensive coordinator is very different than bringing them back as head coach. Henry, even when so many of the fans, most of the fans, all the fans wanted Vic Fangio fired, a lot of them were saying, I have this idea. Let's bring Nathaniel Hackett in as head coach, demote Vic to be defensive coordinator. That'd be a great hire. So everyone knew that Vance was a great defensive coordinator. Vic, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't want you being inconsistent.
Vance, I mean, no one wanted him back as head coach, and not a lot of people wanted him back as defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I mean, especially Vance had a tough draw. There's some places you can go and lose, and people will be like, oh, this sucks, and now we don't like you. But to have the first back-to-back losing seasons in your only 2 seasons for the Broncos in more than 40 years, I mean, the hate level just steps up even more.
It's true.
So, of course, nobody wanted him back in any position because everybody thought at the time, well, we'll be in the playoffs next year and we'll be competing for Super Bowls the year after that.
Yeah.
As we still believe to this day.
Exact. Wouldn't that be something if Vance is part of the team that brings them back with how much crap he's got, and some of it rightfully so. But wouldn't that be something if, to wrap up and kind of go full circle with the Vance Joseph era, if we get Vance Joseph having the time of his life, hosting a Lombardi trophy, hoisting
There we-
a Lombardi
yeah.
trophy alongside Sean Payton. Boy, that would be something. And then you know what?
So fun.
Fans would love Vance Joseph then.
Yes, just like they now love Wade Phillips, like nobody 20 years ago or 25 years ago would have ever expected.
Yep, you're so right. And
Also, here's just a fun fact: Wade Phillips finished top half in the NFL in scoring 22 of his 40 seasons as defensive coordinator or head coach.
Yeah.
Which is better than 3 of 7 for Vance.
Yeah.
Obviously. But again, like
wait, did you say top 10?
top half.
Okay.
And again, there were some number 1 defenses in there.
Yeah.
Broncos fans will remember.
Yeah.
And so this isn't like a catch-all stat, but I was just curious, so I looked it up. Again, Vance runs that system. And if you were going to say Wade Phillips is going to be a grand slam hire, then I don't think you can say Vance Joseph is the worst possible hire, because there's too many similarities. You don't have to say it's a good hire.
Just
or even
because
all right.
you run the same scheme doesn't mean that you're just
No.
as good or can be just as good
No.
or you're similar to someone else. There's so much more than just running
Definitely.
the same scheme,
Definitely.
though, Henry. And that's where we really disagree here. You're putting so much into the scheme, and I'm saying there's so much more than just the scheme. So
Yeah.
I do disagree with what you just said.
I think you can say grand slam and terrible hire.
Yeah, because
Really?
because
Okay.
you just said Wade has been an above-average defensive coordinator more than not. Vance hasn't. Wade has had number 1 defenses in the NFL before. Vance has not come close to that. I don't care about the scheme. Because you can have a scheme that you can run the exact same scheme, and I'm sure there's examples we can find just last year where someone runs the exact same scheme or a very similar scheme. One person succeeds, the other fails miserably.
But again, if it were the Vic Fangio disguise everything too high, top down, everybody 3 guys crash, 1 guy stays, or 2 guys, when there's so much into calling the defense, I think that there is more variability. When 90% of it is, okay, you 5 have those 5, you 5 are rushing, you sit back there and play center field, it takes a lot of the variability out. And again, I'm not saying you have to say, oh, I like Wade Phillips, I like Vance Joseph, but I do think that the same concepts and philosophies and all that sort of stuff that Wade Phillips would have brought to the Broncos are the same ones that Vance Joseph would bring. The difference would be the execution of them.
But, Henry, if it was that simple, then just last year wouldn't have happened with Vance Joseph. They wouldn't have been the second worst defense in the NFL.
Yeah.
Or...
Because they have the corners to play the system.
But, no.
That's what Bo said. They were getting burned.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But with this, you have to change if you don't have the corners.
True.
You can't
Yep.
just be saying, and that's something that we grilled offensive coordinators for in Denver for really almost the past decade was they come in here and they say, we're going to run 3 wide. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We don't care about our personnel. They're going to fit in or they're going to be out of here. No, what bad coaching? You have to adjust. If, knock on wood, Pat Surtain goes down, something happens, and Vance just says, oh, I'm gonna treat Damari Mathis as our number 1. He's just gonna shut down that Devontae Adams on that side. And Devontae Adams goes out and has 200 yards, that's on Vance. That's on the coordinator. That's not on. So I just disagree with you.
And the worst part is, like, his counter to when they were getting burned, if Justin Jefferson is 100 in the first half, what he would do is just say, okay, we're putting 4 guys deep. We're putting like 3 guys right behind him. We're going to stop blitzing because we need everybody in coverage. And then you just get way too passive. And so then they just pick them apart underneath all the way down the field. And so, like, again, he didn't do a good job. But what he does is say, this is this job, this is that job, this is that job. And if you guys can handle it, there's no reason this defense can't be good. And that's why I say, like, it's almost like Vance Joseph isn't even there. Like, the players are just going to go out there, play man coverage. And is that ideal? No, you want to have freaking Vince Lombardi back from the grave saying, oh, this is how we're going to beat him. We can scheme it up. In terms of at this point, especially with the Broncos personnel, especially if the Broncos can go get Patrick Peterson, who I'm gonna talk about way too much in the next couple weeks, I think it could work.
Henry, what's not going to work is this comment for you. Jacob Weddle says,
no.
Saints defense ranking in 2009 when they won the Super Bowl, 25th.
Yep. I think they were like 12th in DVOA. And again, I think...
Wait, so they weren't top 10, huh?
They weren't top 10.
So they could just be
They
average.
did it.
Good.
They did it. But, I mean,
Interesting.
above average. Above average.
Interesting. Well, the Broncos have Joe Lombardi on staff.
Yep.
They've got Vance Joseph on staff. And let's go have the time of our life. We'll be back with the Friday pod tomorrow. Thanks so much for rolling with us. We'll see you tomorrow.